And welcome back to another episode of the Total Sports Live podcast. I'm Jovan Alford, and you already know who I'm joined by. I'm joined by Harrison Brown of Total Sports Live, and also our special guest for the evening for this week's edition of the pod. We've been working weeks to get this on. Me and Harrison's been plotting to get this man on just to kick off our NFL coverage, and we got none other than our guy, Chris Shanafelt. You know him from YouTube. I mean, we're talking about OG YouTube days. He was like interviewing like PJ Hall, Chris Bonner from CSU Playblow. Like when we talking about the OGs of like draft season interviews, he was that guy doing it. So we got him joined on the pod with us. Also the host of the Limestone Livewire, which is the coaches show with head coach Mike Furrey, the Limestone Saints. So appreciate him joining us as well. But before we, say all our pleasantries and everything, make sure you're following us on Twitter at Total Sports Live and also checking out totalsportslive.com. Got a new story up there this week. Harrison had a chance to listen in on Ivy League Media Day last week, so we got a story up about that. Just hearing how all the Ancient Eight teams are looking forward to this season and trying to dethrone the Dartmouth and Princeton from, getting that crown again. So very good story. Check that out, totalsportslive.com. And make sure you're checking out the podcast on all the streaming platforms, Anchor.fm, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, anywhere you can get your podcast, even iHeartRadio. We might be on there too. I know we're on Google Podcasts for sure. So any of those platforms, make sure you check us out there. Download, subscribe, leave us a review. We really appreciate it. And yeah, that's pretty much it. But like I said, join me as always, Harrison, and our special guest, Chris Shanafelt. Fellas, how are you doing? It's great to be back on. I think the last time we had this type of show probably was like, it had to be the NFL preview show last year around like September when we had like at least like 6 of us on this show. So glad to have both of you on, to talk some preseason as we're into week 2. So that means one more week left until things really start getting underway for game planning and stuff for the regular season.
Well, hey, appreciate.
My fault, Chris.
No, you're good. You're good. Go ahead.
Great to be here with you guys, and was just gonna say, Chris, man, thanks for coming on. Really appreciate you joining us here on the TSL Pod. Looking forward to talking about those Chicago Bears with you, man. So yeah, really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, a lot to talk about. Really appreciate you guys for having me. Always a good time talking ball with you guys. So was looking forward to this when the invite was extended, and happy that we're here.
Yeah, I told Chris leading up to the show, I was like, I have to make sure we're on our A game, especially how yesterday's show went with the coaches show, and it was just like just on it. I was like, we gotta make sure we're on it and having fun like they were too. So, like you said, we got to talk about those Chicago Bears. We're officially finished the first 2 weeks of preseason, which means NFL, the regular season is right on the doorstep, which also means fantasy's underway with drafts and people putting down those bets. It's just about to be really madness for the next like umpteenth weeks until like February. But then we got more football after that, but not NFL. And there's been a lot of interesting storylines, that people we've been following across the league, from quarterback battles to new head coaches at different places. However, there's one team that hasn't been under the microscope this offseason, surprisingly. That is the Chicago Bears. The Bears made a lot of moves this offseason, getting a new GM, bye-bye Ryan Pace and hello Ryan Poles. They got rid of Matt Nagy. See you later, Matt Nagy. Hello, Matt Eberflus, who was the very acclaimed defensive coordinator from the Indianapolis Colts. But they do bring back Justin Fields for year 2 to build off of what he did in year 2. However, there's been a lot of stories coming out in Bears training camp. People talking about Fields, talking about the receiving corps, the lack of weapons, Roquon Smith. Just a whole bunch of stuff going on with the Chicago Bears. But, starting with you, Chris, since you're live, since you're in Chicago, you're listening to everything. You've been to Bears camp as well. You also host the Chris and DJ show, which we can't forget that as well, with former Chicago Bears DB DJ Moore. what have been your general thoughts on the Bears this summer? Like I said, getting a new head coach, and then also some new coordinators as well. I can't fail to mention that, with especially new offensive coordinator Luke Getsy, who this is his first coordinating role, I think, in the NFL.
Yep. Yeah. So very busy offseason for the Chicago Bears. Like you said, they've not really been under the microscope, although there has been a lot of media beatdown on them because of the wide receiver depth that they have, or lack thereof, behind Darnell Mooney. But going back to the new GM, Ryan Poles, he comes over after what sounds like he was pretty close to getting the Carolina Panthers job last offseason, ended up not getting it. Now he had a couple interviews this offseason, actually chose the Bears over the Minnesota Vikings job, which was pretty interesting. So he's coming over from the Kansas City Chiefs. And then he hires Matt Eberflus, the Colts defensive coordinator, to replace, of course, Matt Nagy. So you fire a Ryan and Matt, and you bring in another Ryan and Matt, which was a kind of a punching bag joke for the Chief Chicago Bears organization, or how a lot of people like to view them as when these hirings first went down. But no, I mean, obviously guys that are certainly deserving of getting these new positions. And just looking at the staff that Eberflus brought in, you mentioned Luke Getsy. I think it's going to be huge for Justin Fields and this offense. Am I expecting Justin Fields to have MVP type season, MVP type numbers? No, certainly not. I think now, hopefully, one day, hopefully we're talking about that, but got to take it slow. I do think that there is a lot that has been made about the lack of wide receiver depth that the Bears have, and how they're kind of setting Justin Fields up for failure. I'm not a big buyer in that. Yeah, you would have liked to have seen them maybe add a couple more guys in free agency, maybe spend a little bit more money at wide receiver, especially after losing out on Larry Ogunjobi, who they already had planned on signing to a monster deal. They didn't really do anything with that money that they had planned on spending on the big free agent 3 technique. Instead, they go ahead and sign Justin Jones from the Chargers, who's a quality player, but again, not really looked at as a Larry Ogunjobi type football player. They add Al-Qadim Muhammad, who's coming over from the Colts. Obviously, familiarity there with Matt Eberflus, and new Bears defensive coordinator Alan Williams, who was a position coach with the Colts, former defense coordinator of the Minnesota Vikings under Leslie Frazier. He's now the Bears defensive coordinator with with this Bears team under Matt Eberflus. So there's a lot of moving pieces, obviously. Can't forget to mention they shipped out Khalil Mack to the Chargers for a second-round pick. Akeem Hicks is no longer on this team. He's with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Those two guys were crucial pieces to the Bears defense the last 4 or 5 years now. You're looking over, and you're kind of looking at a lot of new faces. Eddie Jackson is still back there. Ryan Poles was able to get him a new running mate at strong safety, and Jaquan Brisker, who you guys are probably more than familiar with, coming from Penn State, and he's been an absolute baller since day one. At game 1 of the preseason against the Kansas City Chiefs, he literally forced a 3-and-out all by himself. It was absolutely incredible. Unfortunately, the other day, news comes out he has a hand injury. Turns out he had to have thumb surgery. All signs point to him being back, though, by week 1. So he's certainly been living up to the hype. And then the other second-round pick, Kyler Gordon, he's kind of missed a lot of time so far this offseason. He did play, though, this past week against the Seattle Seahawks. And it looks as if their plan for now is to start him at nickelback, which, if you're familiar with the Indianapolis Colts defense, the 3 most important positions on that defense was the 3 technique. They went out at one point and obviously traded a bunch of draft capital for DeForest Buckner, who then obviously signed a monster deal there with Indianapolis and was a big piece to their defense. Then you, of course, got Darius Leonard, who I don't think really needs any introduction, one of the league's top linebackers in the NFL, and certainly could be the best linebacker right now in the NFL. And then the nickelback position, Kenny Moore, a former undrafted free agent, turned Pro Bowler, turned All-Pro nickel. And, you look at kind of what Matt Eberflus is doing with some of these pieces that Ryan Poles was able to acquire this offseason. At least for now, it looks like Kyler Gordon is going to be getting his first look at nickelback to start the season. So that's a pretty important position in Eberflus's defense. The 3 technique, they kind of whiffed. They missed out on Larry Ogunjobi. I don't know if I would say whiffed. They did their due diligence. They signed him to, they had a deal done verbally. Obviously, it wasn't signed. He had to pass the physical. He didn't pass the physical. So whatever it was, and it was because of that foot injury that he suffered last year with the Cincinnati Bengals. He ended up staying on the he was a free. He ended up staying in free agency for a little longer than most had anticipated, and he eventually signed a 1-year kind of prove-it deal with the Pittsburgh Steelers. So long story short, they go out, they sign Justin Jones to be that 3 technique. So he's expected to have a pretty big impact on this Bears defense. And then bring in Al-Qadim Muhammad. They might be switching in and out. We'll see how that plays out once we start the season. And then you got the linebacker. And I know this is going to be a topic that we're going to be talking about here shortly. Roquon Smith, who is back in practice, ended his hold in, as they call it now, and will be betting on himself and playing out his final year under contract. So those are kind of where the Bears are at right now. A lot of unproven pieces, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, especially for a team like the Chicago Bears, who a lot of people have as, probably one of the worst 3 teams in the NFL. On paper, obviously.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think honestly, I think he laid out the entire offseason really well, more than what some other people would do. Like, there's been a lot that's gone on, a lot that's happened. Like you said, and I didn't know this, like you said, the 3 most positions on the defense for this team, they don't necessarily have yet, which is okay, because this is like almost like how it was with the Eagles in retrospect in some weird way. Like, this team is not expected to do much. Whatever you get from them, you get from them. And, that leads me to talk about, the most heavily scrutinized, criticized position in sports, probably not sports, but definitely in football, it's the quarterback. And he, like you mentioned, they didn't go out and spend the money on the wide receiver. And let's not be real, there was wide receivers out there for the taking. We saw the Lions give DJ Chark a nice 1-year, $10 million deal. I'm sure a lot of teams could afford that. Like the Bears, but he goes to the Lions. There's, numerous guys. Juju Smith-Schuster takes a 1-year deal. So the guys were there. They opt not to do that. They signed Byron Pringle. They bring in, a lot of different guys. Straight from the Kill Harry, pick up Equinemius St. Brown, Amon-Ra St. Brown's brother. So they pretty much revamped the wide receiver corps, but doing it in a cheap way. And that leads, and it leads to the question of, and me and you talked about this before, like, it's almost like, will they give him a fair shot? Knowing the weapons that he has, knowing the weapons that he has around them, and what happened last year. And we look at what happened last year. He had a 58.9 completion percentage, 1,870 yards, 7 TDs, 10 interceptions. It's not bad. It's doable, knowing what the situation was with Matt Nagy and him playing a quarterback roulette with him and Andy Dalton and the great Nick Foles. And then we look at rushing yards, doing what he does best, 420 yards rushing, 2 touchdowns. So that's kind of like, I want to say that's like the floor for Fields, and now he can potentially move up in the second year. So just, what are your thoughts? And I'm going to get Harrison's thoughts on this as well. Just what are your thoughts about Fields heading into the second year with, not much at wide receiver? He still has Cole Kmet, and he has a solid running game with David Montgomery and Khalil Herbert.
Yeah, it's tough because, here he is. He's learning another new system in only his second year in the NFL. Here's his, 2 years, 2 new offensive systems now under Luke Getsy. But Luke Getsy coming over from Green Bay, I'm really excited to see him bring because he was the quarterback's coach in Green Bay.
Right.
he's not turning Justin Fields into Aaron Rodgers. No, but I'm excited to see him use Justin Fields play action pass. I mean, why that really wasn't a thing last year under Matt Nagy, can't tell you why. That wasn't much of a thing with Mitch Trubisky either. Mitch Trubisky isn't even half the athlete that Justin Fields is, but you were able to use Mitch Trubisky in those ways and use the athleticism that he has. And we've seen the athleticism that he had in the preseason last year where he absolutely torched the Bears preseason game too, Mitch Trubisky, that is. But anyways, I'm really excited to see Luke Getsy kind of bring some more of these sophisticated type, fake handoff. Yeah, I mean, 2018, the offense was creative, and that was Matt Nagy's first year. It seemed like teams in the NFL really caught on really quickly to what he was trying to do, to where he was just he almost didn't want to make it creative at all towards the end of his time here in Chicago. So, and that was with a rookie quarterback in Justin Fields, and unfortunately he had to kind of go through that last season. So it's nice, and you've already heard Justin Fields talk about some of the things that Luke Getsy is getting him to do. And I think what can't be lost here is that the Bears do have some quality running backs on their roster. Again, Matt Nagy, for whatever reason, did not want to run the ball. He was even quoted when running the I formation and running the ball down opponents' throats, and it was working with David Montgomery. He was quoted post-game after a win, "I didn't come here to run the I formation," when that is what got you the win. So anyways, I think that this staff knows that first and foremost, they're going to be a run-first team. They have the running backs to do it. David Montgomery entering his final year under his contract as well. Khalil Herbert entering year 2. And then they drafted Tristan Ebner out of Baylor, who unfortunately last game suffered an injury. Still not much of a timetable on when he's expected to return. But so far, he's really flashed and looked pretty good. Rookie 6th-round pick. So they have a really stacked backfield. I think the Bears are going to use all 3 of those guys once Ebner is healthy, but certainly Montgomery and Khalil Herbert right away. So it's going to be a run-first offense, which is only going to help Justin Fields in the passing game out a lot. And then, I think at the end of the season, we're going to look at it, and we're going to look at this wide receiver depth that the Bears have this season. And let's not forget, entering next year, I believe they have the 3rd most cap space available in the NFL. So Justin Fields, if he's able to prove that he's the guy, that he can take this team to the next level, and this team wants to, and the new regime that is wants to spend and add around him, they're going to have more than enough to do that next off season. Now, you'll have to look at who's available specifically at the wide receiver or whatever position. Obviously, I'm looking at wide receivers. You got DK Metcalf locked up, Deebo Samuel locked up with San Francisco. So a lot of these guys are already locked up. So we'll see who's available and whatnot when that time comes. But it's going to be a run-first offense for the Bears this year. That's going to obviously make things easier for Justin Fields in the passing game. And then I think if you're the guy at the quarterback position, we see a lot of times where if you're the guy at the quarterback position, you almost make players better around you. And I think we could see that this season with Justin Fields and some of these, quote unquote, no-name wide receivers or guys that have yet to prove themselves really in the NFL. I mean, Byron Pringle was a pretty good player in Kansas City, but he's coming to Chicago where, as I kind of mentioned earlier, we don't have a Travis Kelce. We don't have a Tyreek Hill. We don't have a Patrick Mahomes throwing you the football. And certainly don't have an Andy Reid at play caller. No disrespect to anybody with the Bears organization, players or coaches in that comparison. But, this is a totally new situation for Byron Pringle, Equinemius St. Brown. I do think it does say something that Luke Getsy coming over from Green Bay brings one of his guys over. And there's been rumors that Aaron Rodgers there's a disconnect there with him and Equinemius St. Brown, that Aaron Rodgers would just kind of zone in on his guys, and obviously Devontae Adams was definitely one of his guys. So we'll see how a fresh start works out for Equinemius St. Brown. He's kind of been a star, not named Darnell Mooney at the wide receiver position. Then I'm really excited to see Bayless Jones Jr. This was a draft pick that I was kind of scratching my head at. A lot of people were cracking jokes. He was 25. I think he's close to 26 years old, older as a NFL rookie, obviously. But, there's some already comparisons out there, and we kind of got to halt them a little bit. But to Percy Harvin or maybe a Cordell Patterson. I could see him used both at wide receiver and in the backfield. And right away, his first preseason game against Seattle, he almost takes a punt return to the house. He ended up getting caught, but it was like a 60-yard punt return. Showed off his speed on one of his very first times he touches the ball. So he's going to be a player I'm interested in seeing how he's used in this offense. And again, hopefully by the end of the year, we're talking about how Justin Fields is able to elevate the play of these wide receivers. We know who Darnell Mooney is. And then after that, it's a lot of unproven guys. And hopefully by the end of the season, Byron Pringle, who's only on a 1-year deal, hopefully he cashes out on a nice 2-3-year deal worth more money in the offseason. And hopefully that's in thanks to his quarterback, kind of giving him the right opportunities down the field and hitting them in the spots that he's able to go out and make those plays with those opportunities. Obviously just an example, but hopefully at the end of the year, we're talking about how the Bears are going to be building around Justin Fields and not the alternative.
That's certainly, I think we all hope that's the case, because I think we all saw the talent, the glimmers of it last season. It just, like you said, when you have a head coach that's determined to not run the ball, which puts your quarterback in precarious situations and not use them to his best abilities and strengths, which is always an interesting thing when coaches don't do that. You set up your quarterback for failure. And I think, hopefully he's better set up for success this time around with a fresh offensive coordinator who's coming in with fresh eyes and probably sees the game differently than, not to say a retread would, but, someone that's been around offensive coordinator for a minute probably would see the game. And it's interesting, Harrison, Chris said something very interesting, which was saying that the Bears offense is going to be run first. It was almost like that same way with Jalen Hurts last year, which was that they had to figure it out too. They had to figure out and learn, hey, we can't be throwing the ball 30 to 35 times. It won't work. I mean, sure, if you want to play that way, as we saw in the Chiefs game, then cool. Like, if you want to do that, then you do that. But we saw what the Eagles were able to do. They were able to adjust and become a run-first team, really making teams defend the run, putting Jalen Hurts in running situation where he can run, which then helped to elevate and open up the pass game. So I think we could potentially, if the coaching staff in Chicago does it the right way, we could possibly see that leap from Justin, Fields. From Justin Fields, and especially because he's already had 12 games under his belt last season, way more games than what Jalen Hurts had under his belt coming into last season.
No, you're absolutely right. We saw the Eagles go from a pass-heavy team versus teams like Dallas that threw the ball 30, 40 times to that game versus Detroit where I think Jalen Hurts threw the ball under 20 times. I mean, it doesn't have to be to that extreme in Chicago. I think they might be trailing in some games. They might have to throw the ball a little bit with Justin Fields. But one thing that Chris mentioned that really caught my eye, and just looking back at some of the stats from last year, was the play-action pass game with Justin Fields. I think that's somewhere that he can really, really elevate the Bears' offense, really take strides in his game. And that starts with getting the run game going, getting David Montgomery going, getting Khalil Herbert going. That's a strength for this Bears team this year, is that running back room. Chris mentioned that as well. I think they should definitely get the run game going. And then you have to look at Justin Fields' athleticism as well. He averaged 5.8 yards per carry last year. That was second most in the NFL for quarterbacks. That's very encouraging. Get him involved in some of those play action passes. Get him involved in some boots, moving outside of the pocket. He throws the ball very well on the pocket as well. Had a 92% passer rating last year outside of the pocket. So I'm intrigued by Justin Fields. Another thing Chris mentioned, elevate those receivers. Take some of those no-name guys like Byron Pringle, who I'm actually excited about. I'm excited to see him kind of elevate to the opportunity that he's getting right now. This is a bigger opportunity than he had in Kansas City. He's going to be on the field more with the Bears. Let's see what he does with more reps, more routes out there on the field. So I think that's going to be big for Justin Fields. Elevate some of those guys. Let's see Cole Kmet take another step in his game, maybe become, one of those top-tier tight ends in the NFL this year. That could be big. Justin Fields did really well last year in 12 personnel with 2 tight ends on the field. Get Cole Kmet involved, get some of the Bears' other tight ends involved. I'm intrigued by the Bears this year. I know that they're one of the worst teams in the league on paper. That's what people are saying, but exactly right. Let's see what happens week 8, week 10. Let's see what this team look like. Let's see if Justin Fields is taking steps forward in his development, in his progression. That's what I'm going to be looking for more than a wins total, or if they can sneak into a wild card game this year. It's not really my concern with a first-year coaching staff and a second-year quarterback. Let's see if we can see some of those developments and if they have some pieces on this roster to move forward with.
Yeah, 100%. I think you both are eloquently stating this pretty well. And, Chris, and thinking about it, like you said, and it's so weird that, talking about Matt Nagy real fast, it's so weird that he did not use the play action game, because in Andy Reid's offensive system, I'm pretty sure the play action passing game was a staple to open up things. So I just find it just puzzling and weird that he would even, do that. And Harrison mentioned another guy, and I definitely want to get your thoughts on this. Another guy who I think who can step up, and I think will most definitely score a touchdown for not scoring a touchdown last season, is, Cole Kmet. This is a guy who, even though Jimmy Graham was on the roster last year, like, Cole Kmet was tight end number one. He had the targets, had the receptions, had the yards, but he didn't score. Do you think, Cole Kmet can move up into that, not top 10 tight end range? Because I don't know if he's necessarily going to get there. Not saying that he can't, but move into that, hey, this guy's like number 10 to like number 15. Like, he's starting to like really move up. What do you think he has to do to kind of get himself elevated into that conversation, where almost like how we talk about TJ Hawkinson, because he doesn't have a steady quarterback. He hasn't had really a steady quarterback, for years. I'm trying to think what David Blau, Jared Goff last year. I mean, he hasn't had, he had Matthew Stafford for a few years, but that helped. But again, not the flashiest tight end, but still has been very productive, in his short career so far.
Yeah, Cole, if he's not being discussed in that, let's say, 12 to 15 ranking at the tight end position, I think it's going to be a really it'll be a down year for him, because, I mean, almost everything is kind of working in his favor heading into this season. You got to think, I mean, again, they're going to be run happy team. He's kind of a tight end that is best of both worlds. He's not afraid to get in there and block. He's obviously a decent pass catcher down the field. I mean, he's not going to burn anyone. We don't got Vernon Davis 2.0 here, but he is a pretty nice athlete at the tight end position, and could get wide and could get open down the field. He needs to make the jump. You mentioned it. He didn't have a single touchdown last year. We had tight ends on this roster. You named it. Jimmy Graham, who obviously, we're at the 3-yard line. Let's just toss it up in the corner of the end zone. Chances are Jimmy Graham's going to come down with it. We like our chances. I respect that. We had, Harrison, you'll appreciate this, we had Jesper Horsted catch regular season touchdowns, game-winning touchdowns against the Las Vegas Raiders in this last year with the rookie Justin Fields. Cole Kmet, 60 receptions for just over 600 yards, 0 touchdowns. It's gonna change this year. I'm confident in saying that, and it needs to change this year, because if it doesn't, honestly, the Cole Kmet era in Chicago might be over. I always kind of compared Cole Kmet, and it's funny that you guys are two Philly guys, obviously cover the Philadelphia Eagles as well. I always thought Cole Kmet's ceiling, and some thought that it was higher, some thought it was lower, but I always thought of Cole Kmet and his ceiling being like a Brent Selleck type tight end, bigger bodied receiving target that you got there. Again, best of both worlds. I don't know if Cole Kmet will ever get to the level of blocking like Brent Selleck, but certainly in the pass catching realm, I could see Cole Kmet kind of being that type of player where, honestly, I will be more than happy with that if that's who Cole Kmet turns out to be. If he turns out better, great. Obviously, there's a chance that he turns out worse as well. But if Cole Kmet isn't being discussed in that top 12 to 15, I'll even give him 16. Top half of the rankings in terms of tight ends this year, it'll be looked at as a disappointment, and the Bears might just need to be forced to look somewhere else, whether that's adding a veteran in free agency. Again, they got plenty of cap space heading into next offseason, or maybe they address it in the draft as well.
Yeah, we'll definitely see. Hopefully, for Bears fans, for fantasy fans, hopefully Kmet.
For the hometown kid, Cole Kmet, who grew up a Bears fan.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, hopefully he has that breakout year, because he's, like we said, through his first 2 years, he's actually had the production. Like, the production is not the crazy part is not the issue, right? The target's not the issue. The catches, the receptions is just that he haven't been utilized in the red zone. And I think that I wholeheartedly believe that changes this year with a new regime when we know tight ends can be a weapon in the red zone. And I think if you get that running game going, like we talked about, having him utilized in the red zone just going to make this offense way much more deadlier and harder to cover. This is the Total Sports Live podcast here on Anchor. I'm Jovan Alford, joined always Harrison Brown, special guest Chris Shanafelt here talking some NFL preseason Chicago Bears stuff and talk as well. And before we wrap up our Bears section, we got to talk about Roquon Smith, Chris. You know, that was I'm gonna say about a good 2 weeks for it was just nothing but Roquon Smith talking, wondering, you know, what's going to happen. Like, is he going to sign a deal? Are the Bears going to cave in and, you know, give him what he wants, or will the Bears end up trading him because it just doesn't look like these two sides will, you know, meet up, and he felt disrespected about the offer that they did give. So a lot of back and forth, and then we finally see, you know, he shows up to camp. He holds a press conference, he answers the questions like we talked about. He said he's betting on himself and he's going into his final year in his deal. And I think, like me and you talked about, you know, off air, you know, this could work out for both sides, right? If you're Roquon, you bet on yourself, you get a big payday by the Bears, or you go somewhere else. Or if you're the Bears, if he balls out, you could say, yeah, we got our linebacker of the future, you know, for many years to come. So just what have been your, you know, view of the whole Roquon, you know, Smith situation? Because I think, if, you know, for Bears fans, and I can't speak for y'all, but it's just like, all right, you guys didn't re-sign Allen Robinson and that didn't go well. And now we have Roquon Smith. Like, you can't go 0 for 2 and, you know, trying to keep, you know, big name players around.
Yeah. I mean, you let Allen Robinson walk, and that was a situation that just got kind of ugly, really all throughout last season. Again, you trade Khalil Mack. There was rumors that Robert Quinn was going to be dealt. That hasn't happened, and it doesn't look like that will be happening. And then obviously, again, Akeem Hicks and a number of players in the offseason. James Daniels goes to Pittsburgh, who was looked at, and the new regime kind of caught a lot of flack for letting him walk, and it looks like he ain't having a great time in Pittsburgh. He's struggling early on there on that offensive line. Another name was, you know, Eddie Goldman. He actually ends up retiring, and then so on and so forth. Bilal Nichols goes on with the Raiders. He's unfortunately starting the year on PUP. So, I mean, this was a regime that caught a lot of flack early on in the offseason for letting these guys walk, and you know, unfortunately, due to some injury circumstances and unfortunately due to just some bad play, it looks like they may have done the right decision. Now, obviously, Allen Robinson absolutely balling out so far, it sounds like, with the Rams. Totally expecting him to, as well as now he's playing with the best quarterback he's had in his career in Matthew Stafford, and that's going to be an electric offense, no doubt about it. But getting back to the Roquon Smith situation, We've seen a lot of holdouts, and we've seen a lot of now hold-ins that tend to get pretty ugly. This one seems like it got ugly, but in a respectful way, if that makes any sense. I mean, Roquon Smith didn't miss a single practice. He reported to OTAs. He reported to minicamp. I mean, he was there for all of this, learning this new system. And then a day or two before training camp kicks off is when he announced that he was going to hold in a day after they show off the new uniforms, the new helmet, that is, the orange helmet with the orange uniform, the orange jersey, and had him be the kind of model for those new uniforms. It was a day after those were released when Roquon Smith announced that he was going to do this hold-in. And then it was the Twitter announcement that he gave to the statement that he gave to Ian Rappaport that, I mean, he really tug at, you know, the fan of the Bears, saying, hey, you know, I love the city of Chicago. There's nothing I want to do but finish my career here with the Chicago Bears. Unfortunately, the new regime has negotiated in, I forget the exact term he used, but it was like unfair faith or something like that. And I mean, he really, you know, took a jab at the new regime. So That was something that I was not expecting, and it just turned out that was the Bears' what they call Family Fest Day, where they have the open practice at Soldier Field. And 2 hours later, Roquon was still there after this statement was released. So again, I mean, it's been really interesting because I do believe Roquon. I do think he wants to stay in Chicago. I think he mentioned how, it meant something to him to follow in the footsteps of Mike Singletary or even dating back even further to Dick Butkus and then Brian Urlacher or Lance Briggs. And, it means something to him to follow in those footsteps of those legendary linebackers. And then he reports to training, or, he's always been reported to training camp, but then he actually practices for the first time this past Saturday, which obviously circulated in the news cycle, and met with the media afterwards. And again, really held his own, which in a sense I respect. I respect that when the lights are on and the microphones are in your face, that you're keeping that same tone and you're making the message clear in what you want and how you feel about how these negotiations have gone. On the other front, Ryan Poles, rookie GM, first time going through this. You're dealing with a player that doesn't have an agent. He is his own agent. I'm glad Ryan Poles didn't, wasn't quit. I'm usually on the player's side, and I am on Roquon's side. I want to see him with the Bears, but I'm also glad that Ryan Poles is letting this play out because this is a new defense. You're going into a 4-3 defense, and from middle linebacker, Roquon Smith was his first 4 years in the league. He's now going to will side linebacker, which, am I expecting it to be so much different? No, not really, but we're going to see him in some new situations and be asked to do some new things in this defense where Roquon could be looking back a few months down the road thinking to himself, man, I just made myself a lot of money because I was making those splash plays in this new defense that they weren't saying I was making in years past, like a Darius Leonard. Roquon Smith, I think he only has one interception in his career, and it was a pick six, and that was last year against the Cincinnati Bengals. But other than that, I mean, there aren't a lot of splash plays. He's got a ton of tackles, had over 160 tackles last season, led the team, and it was pretty funny. Today they said, I think it was the last practice open for fans. And the very first defensive play, Roquon Smith, fights through the offensive line, gets back what would have been a sack, and the whole team cheers. And, one of the players is quoted in saying, he's back. So, I mean, there's a lot of excitement, and players on the team have spoken on Roquon's leadership and that it means a lot to them that, hey, he's here doing everything but practicing. And obviously players know it's a business and they kind of stay out of that side of things. So, I mean, it got a little rocky. It got a little nasty at times, but, it could have been a lot worse. And it sounds like Roquon, hopefully he gets what he wants after this season because it wouldn't make any sense to trade him, especially when the player is voicing his displeasure with the organization. Teams are going to want to try and get you on a slide deal, I suppose. Mm-hmm. They're not going to give you what he's exactly worth when he makes that known. So play out the season. Let's revisit it after the year, and who knows? Maybe you'll make yourself even more money than you were even asking for when these contract negotiations have now ended, as he said in that press conference.
Yeah, like you said, Roquon have been pretty good since he got drafted by the Bears in 2018. At the age of 21, he's been dynamic. Like you said, only 14 career sacks over his career. But when you look at, like you said, he's been a tackling machine. He's had over 100 tackles every single year. Like, the man's all over the field. But I think where we see the development and the growth at is the tackles for loss. Had 18 in 2020 and had 12 in last season. And I think he has more TFLs. That's only going to help up his ante a little bit more because they're saying, oh, this guy's actually getting in the backfield and wreaking havoc and making plays. And he also has 17 quarterback hits over his career. So, hey, we'll see how it plays out. I know that's going to definitely be highly watched. During the season, hopefully for Bears fans, we'll get to like week 8 and they'll hear something that says Roquon Smith has signed his 4-year extension with the Bears, making him the highest paid linebacker in NFL history. It's not far-fetched. It could happen. It could happen, especially if things turn out in a certain type of way by week 8 for the Bears. Let's say they're treading water. Maybe they're 500. You never know. There could be something there for Roquon Smith. So hey, we'll see how that goes. See how that transpires during this season. And like I said, this is Total Sports Live Podcast. Really appreciate everybody tuning in and checking this out when you do get a chance. Before we wrap up, like I said, we do got to talk about the NFL preseason. We're going into week 3. We just wrapped up week 2 of the preseason. So we got to talk about, what were some of our takeaways. We did that last week where we just kind of briefly touched on some things that, me, Nick, and Harrison, saw not only from an Eagles perspective, but from around the league. So now we're going to take this exercise and do it with Chris, looking at, some of our, takeaways. And, for me, guys, one of my, takeaways for this, from what we saw this past weekend was the emergence of Isiah Likely and the role he could play in this Ravens offense. When I saw the Ravens drafted him in round 4, let me be out there in front. I wanted the Eagles to draft him because I just know how skilled of a guy he is, watching Coastal Carolina the way we've been able to watch Coastal Carolina, over these last 2 seasons. Like when you watch Coastal Carolina, you knew it was Grayson McCall, it was CJ Maribel, it was Isiah Likely, and Jovan. Like those were the guys you were watching. And defensively, you're looking at Teron Jackson, who's now Philadelphia Eagle on the side. And was also on the CS podcast, by the way, on air. There you go. He was on there. So when I saw that, I was like, all right, this Isiah Likely kid's going to be good. Like he has that skill to be that guy that can line up at tight end, but also he can flex out wide. And now he ends up in a spot, gets drafted to probably one of the perfect teams that utilizes the tight end in the Baltimore Ravens. And we saw him have a breakout game against the Arizona Cardinals with Tyler Huntley having 8 catches for over 100 yards and a touchdown. Like he's that type of game breaker that I think, for this Ravens offense, I think they're going to need it just because they don't have Hollywood Brown, anymore. They traded him. I mean, obviously they do have Rashad Bateman, who I think is going to be a very good wide receiver for him. But after Rashad Bateman, it's kind of like you don't know who's going to be wide receiver number 2. Is it going to be James Prochet?
I still have faith in Duvernay.
That's what we're hoping for, right? Will it be, Prochet, who had a great college career at SMU? Will it be Duvernay, who a lot of us, we see the speed. It's just, can we get the speed on offense? Or will it be my guy, Tylan Wallace, who, who was a very good wide receiver at Oklahoma State, made the tough catches, but hasn't really put it together in the pros, just yet. But knowing that, Likely could be the team's, I think, 3rd or 4th leading wide receiver, with Mark Andrews drawing the amount of attention. And we know the Ravens hadn't had really a dynamic duo at tight end with Mark Andrews. Max Williams was, was okay. Nick Boyle, he was okay until he tore up his knee. He was okay, but not this type of athleticism at tight end, fellas, that Likely brings. And I think I'm not going to say he's going to score 6 touchdowns or anything like that, because that would just be asinine. But I will say that knowing that he's going to be on a competitive team and knowing how they're going to possibly utilize him, I think we could see him score about 3 touchdowns this season. And I would not be remiss to say he could be a dark horse for Offensive Rookie of the Year. I'm saying that right now.
The Athletic reported earlier this week that he figures to play significant snaps from the jump in Baltimore's offense.
That's what we like to hear.
That's what we like to hear. He's one of their top pass catchers right now. Yes, he's a tight end. Yes, they have Mark Andrews, but he's just going to be a guy that they have to get on the field. They're going to have to get creative, and that's something that Baltimore does well anyway. Offensive coordinator Greg Roman, they do a good job getting different guys on the field. Patrick Ricard, their fullback, is a guy who's been involved over the years. So I don't think Isiah Likely is going to have any problem being involved in that Ravens offense, and I think that performance against Arizona, 8 receptions, 100 yards, and a touchdown, I think that could just be the start for him. I think that he's got a lot of upside. You mentioned it. We saw it at Coastal Carolina over the last few years, the type of playmaker he is. He's a guy who does a lot after the catch. He can get a lot of yards after the catch, tough to tackle. And Jovan, you mentioned it, just that athleticism as well. He can make a lot of plays. I'm intrigued to see what he can do for the Ravens this year.
Yeah, and just piggybacking on what you guys have said, I mean, I think a lot of 2 tight end sets are in the future for the Baltimore Ravens. I know they've run that plenty already, but I think we're going to see even more of it. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if we see Isiah Likely split out wide at times. I mean, you talked about the lack of depth that they have at wide receiver. I know they also just signed, I think yesterday, Demarcus Robinson from the Chiefs. I was surprised he was still available. Signed him to a cheap 1-year deal. So obviously nothing's guaranteed there, but I could see Isiah Likely. I mean, you want to talk about not sounding asinine, Jovan. I mean, do we got a Kyle Pitts 2.0 over here? Because I'll start it right now. Overreaction, whatever you want to call it. But now I know he's not going to have a 1,000-yard season from the get-go. No, but he is going to be a major piece to this Ravens offense. And I mean, come on, you guys. I mean, Lamar Jackson, very well, he's got a huge chip on his shoulder wanting to get that new contract. And he's been one of the guys very vocal, both he and Mark Andrews, talking about Isiah Likely and just how impressed they've been with him so far early on in his Ravens career. I think he is due for a big year this season. What the numbers will look like, I don't know, but I think he very well will have his a big impact felt on this Ravens offense this season. Again, I can see him being used in a number of different ways for the Ravens, no doubt.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's going to be fun to see him, because what we saw from him in Coastal Carolina these last 2 years is not a fluke. It's definitely for real. And I think we're seeing it up close and personal. Like you said, he won't be Kyle Pitts just because they actually have another wide receiver / tight end to throw to. He won't be Pitts. But he could be the poor man's Kyle Pitts, which is not bad if you're a Ravens fan. So, hey, we'll see how it plays out. We'll see if he plays in the last preseason game for the Ravens, which will be against the Washington Commanders. Next thing that we want to highlight is something that Harrison brought up, and I'm going to let him lead this one. Is the quarterback competition in Pittsburgh between Kenny Pickett, Jersey's own, and former Chicago Bear Mitch Trubisky, who made some plays against the Jaguars, spun out of a would-be sack, but then almost threw an interception at the same time, which was the full Mitch Trubisky experience.
You got that right.
Well, listen, I'll start off with Kenny Pickett because I'm really interested to hear what Chris has to say about Mitch Trubisky being up close and personal for so many years with the Bears. I'm sure he has a lot of interesting thoughts. So I'm going to leave that part to Chris, but I'll say with Kenny Pickett, Jovan mentioned it, Jersey guy, obviously off the bat right there, I'm going to love Kenny Pickett and root for him. But I got to be honest, I've been very impressed with him in this preseason just in general. One of the knocks on him coming into the draft process was if he could get the ball out quick enough for the NFL game. And I think that's something that he's really shown that he can take strides in. That's something Pittsburgh did a lot in these past few years. They get the ball out quick. Big Ben likes to get the ball out of his hands when he was their quarterback. Kenny Pickett's really done that in the preseason, and he's also thrown the ball very well against pressure. He's 6 for 7 right now when he's under pressure. We saw that throw to Pat Freiermuth, their tight end in this recent game against the Jaguars. Under pressure, had 2 guys coming down on him. Nice ball, nice touch pass. I don't know if Kenny Pickett's going to start the year out. We're coming to a head with that quarterback competition. We're about to find out if they're going to start Trubisky, who they gave that 2-year, $14 million deal to this offseason, or if they're going to go with the young guy. I think just generally speaking, it's a little bit easier to start with the veteran than it is to you start with the rookie and then maybe have to go back to the veteran. I think it's just a more natural process. If you start with that veteran early, see what they've got, see if Trubisky still has some of those intangibles that made him such an early first-round pick back in the day with the Bears. And then, if things don't go well, if you're 3-4, 4-4, and, Trubisky's not playing great, then you turn the ball over to Kenny Pickett, see what he has for the rest of the year. But I think Pittsburgh's in a decent spot right now. I think they actually have 2 solid quarterbacks. I think you could do a lot worse than Mitch Trubisky or Kenny Pickett. So I think it's just kind of a matter of figuring out who's best for the offense, who has a better grip of the offense, who's leading the team better, and kind of go from there. Kenny Pickett's a guy who started 49 career games at Pitt. So it's not a question of lack of experience or needing to develop him, kind of how Trey Lance only started so many games at North Dakota State. Kenny Pickett played 49 games at Pitt. So I don't think that's really the problem. It's just a matter of the scheme fit and who looks better right now. So I'll definitely be intrigued to see who Coach Tomlin picks.
And Pickett just needed to pack up his locker and just walk right across the hallway, right?
right down the hall. That's it. Not even down the road.
No, so in the offseason when I seen it was the Pittsburgh Steelers who had signed Mitch Trubisky, I thought he was going to be following Dable to the Giants and competing for the job there with Daniel Jones. That didn't happen. He lands in Pittsburgh. Obviously, they got huge shoes to fill with Ben Roethlisberger retiring. We all know Mason Rudolph and that, just not a great quarterback, not somebody you want as your starting quarterback. So they go and add Mitch Trubisky. Like you said, 2 years, $14 million. It's not like you're breaking the bank for him. Certainly not, as we've seen the quarterback contracts over the last handful of years now. And then they draft Kenny Pickett. I haven't watched a ton of the Pittsburgh Steelers this preseason, but I've seen a little bit to say or to feel comfortable in saying that. And this is nothing against Mitch Trubisky. I mean, again, do I wish things turned out differently? Yes, obviously. But I mean, in terms of being a stand-up guy and by all means, a great teammate, I've yet to hear somebody say anything bad about him. It's exactly what you want at the quarterback position and as a leader. But I already, and I know it's very early, it seems like there's a little bit more of a buzz and that the team plays a little bit differently already with Kenny Pickett under center from what we've seen so far early on, 2 games into the preseason. So I think Mike Tomlin's going to take all of that in account. And if I had to predict, I think they do go with the young gun, Kenny Pickett, to be their week 1 starter. And then obviously if they need to, all right, come take a seat on the bench, throw in Mitch Trubisky. Like you said, it's a lot easier to go the other route, to start with the veteran and then bring in the rookie. But I think and again, I'm not, connected at all with the Pittsburgh Steelers or anything like that. It's just what I'm kind of predicting. I could see Mike Tomlin just going all in on Kenny Pickett from the get-go and naming them his starter for week 1 to start the season.
Yeah, it wouldn't be surprising to see the Steelers do that, especially where they drafted Pickett at in the first round. I don't think the Steelers have that many needs in the first round, and they obviously decided to take the quarterback who a lot of people didn't think possibly would have been there or possibly wasn't the guy for them, many people thought. So for them, obviously, like you said, for the draft capital they spent for him, and so like you said, there haven't been no negatives, coming out about his play. So if there's more positives, then you have to believe that, that plays into the decision and possibly he'll, get the week 1 start. I'm not sure who they play in week 1. I don't remember off the top of my head, but, it'll be interesting to see how, that quarterback battle plays out. Possibly, I would have to think this last preseason game, they'll probably will see the battle continue, excluding Mason Rudolph. We're not including him. It's Pickett versus Trubisky, not Mason Rudolph. Steelers also did release South Dakota State quarterback Chris Oladokin today as well, who probably should have been on the roster over Mason Rudolph, but that's just me.
Yeah, he didn't. Yeah. If I'm not mistaken, I don't even think he got a rep this preseason, which is
pretty
disappointing.
No, he didn't. That's more puzzling for a guy you draft with in the 7th round, nonetheless. Right. So.
He met with the Bears a couple of times, so I'm going to be interested to see if he lands anywhere and if it's the Bears or not. So we'll see.
Oh, yeah. I totally forgot. Yeah, he could definitely be a practice squad guy, or maybe we see him in the USFL, XFL, in one of those leagues, as he has that skill set where it's like, hey, we could build something with him. So we'll see. We'll see what happens with Chris Oladokin, but also with that quarterback situation. Sticking with the quarterback conversation here, Harrison's got another one. Baker Mayfield named the Panthers quarterback 1. I think we all kind of knew that was going to happen for weeks once they traded for him. It was probably just to see Baker don't fall flat on your face when you get here and, just tread water and don't, screw up in the preseason and you'll hold the job. And then we also heard that Matt Corral will be out for the season. I think he'll be out for the season with a foot injury. So that probably likely means that PJ Walker will be likely QB3 unless they do something with Sam Darnold at who's QB1. But Harrison, Baker gets traded, goes to Carolina, wins starting quarterback job, and it's in a pretty interesting situation. A lot of good weapons, CMC, Chuba Hubbard, DJ Moore. Robbie Anderson, not Sam Darnold's favorite wide receiver, as we saw last year. Tommy Tremble, Rashard Higgins, who I saw a report today that said Higgins could be wide receiver 2 over Robbie Anderson. So Mayfield has weapons. Can he get the job done here and kind of prove people what they saw last year was more so aberration just because he was dealing with the shoulder injury?
Yeah, one of the first things I thought when Baker was announced the job was that Rashard Higgins and Baker Mayfield connection. We saw it in Cleveland. We're bringing it back in Carolina. They actually were a nice duo in Cleveland. They hooked up for a few touchdowns. Hollywood Higgins, they'd roll out the red carpet when he scored. I'm interested to see that. I don't know if he'll be receiver 2, but definitely, receiver 3, receiver 4, get him on the field, see if him and Baker can make some magic happen, especially week 1 when they play the Browns. I think that could be an interesting prop bet on whatever app you're using. Rashard Higgins, anytime touchdown. I could see it in week 1. Baker to Rashard Higgins. I've heard.
I'm writing it down as we speak. Pay attention.
I don't hate it. I don't hate it at all. But just looking at Baker in general, you mentioned it, coming off the shoulder injury last year, fractured shoulder, tore his labrum. Looking at his stats, 67% completion percentage weeks 1 through 6. That's before the injuries really happened. After the injuries, weeks 8 through 17, 8 games during that stretch, 55.9 completion percentage. So that's just a small little, sample size, but the injuries really did affect him last year. That's not going to be a cop-out. Baker Mayfield's not a perfect quarterback by any means. Definitely, you look back at that draft class, he shouldn't have been the first quarterback taken. We can all say that now, but he still is a guy who can go out there and win you games, no doubt. I think he gives them a better shot than Sam Darnold does to win games this year. I think he kind of, like Chris was mentioning with Kenny Pickett, just the energy, just the kind of excitement that this brings to the Panthers offense as opposed to when they had Darnold. I think Baker gives you a little bit more juice. I think Baker's going to give them a little bit of a better shot to go out there and win this year. But, really it's going to come down to that. They need Christian McCaffrey to stay healthy. It doesn't really matter who's a quarterback. It could have been any of the 4 guys that they had. If Christian McCaffrey's not on the field, that team's way worse. They went 1-9 last year without Christian McCaffrey on the field. It's a big factor of their offense. I really like Chuba Hubbard. I think he's a talented running back, but you need Christian McCaffrey on the field. So that's going to be key for them. But I think going with Baker was the right move for the Panthers. And make or break year for our guy, Matt Rule, local guy, former Temple coach. This is it. If they don't win games this year, the Panthers will be looking for a new head coach next year. So definitely a big year.
Yeah, Matt Rule could be finding himself back in the college ranks if this stint doesn't go well. Any quick thoughts from you, Chris, on Baker Mayfield being named QB1 in Carolina?
Yeah. So honestly, so when they first made the trade, I'm thinking, all right, yeah, this is pretty much Baker's job to lose. And then I started to think about it. Well, Sam Darnold, this is year 2 in this offense. He clearly, has the lead in this quarterback battle. I thought if Sam Darnold doesn't fall on his face, that he'll be the week 1 starter. I don't know if that's exactly what happened, if he fell on his face and Baker just totally outmatched him in practice or what. But it turns out, you guys, I don't know if you guys realize this or not, but the Carolina Panthers, that 2nd-round pick that they traded to the Jets turned into Breece Hall. So it was basically a Breece Hall for Sam Darnold, and you're going to pay your backup quarterback, I think $18 million this season. So we'll see how it works out. Baker Mayfield, their week 1 starter, though. If you're Matt Rule, I kind of understand it. If Baker Mayfield has been obviously the better quarterback, that's the direction you're going to go. You mentioned it. You got to prove something this year, Matt Rule. You can only rebuild in the NFL for so long. We see teams turn around pretty quickly in this league. We see it all the time, worst to first. Not saying the Carolina Panthers need to be the Cincinnati Bengals of last season, but you got to see some type of progression this season under this staff, or there could be some monster changes with the Carolina Panthers.
It sure could be. And sticking in the NFC South, we got to talk about a couple more quarterbacks. Just been very quarterback-centric today, and I love it. Marcus Mariota and Desmond Ritter performed well for the Falcons. Harrison, this is another one by you here. The quarterback duo has looked pretty good in the preseason so far. Mariota gets back into the starting role in Atlanta. A lot of people were kind of like, Mariota back as starting quarterback. It doesn't really excite me, but he's made some plays. First preseason game, he had a rushing touchdown, showing off the legs a little bit. Played well in the second game against the Jets, but Desmond Ritter I think, have been the guy that has been most impressive. And for weirdly enough, a lot of people are saying, I don't know how Desmond Ritter fell so far in the draft. I don't get it. I don't understand why. I mean, come on, y'all. Let's not be dumb here. The media tried to make it seem like this quarterback class was trash, and that bled over into them being late drafted where they got drafted. But Desmond Ritter, Mariota, both playing well for Arthur Smith for a team that has little to no expectations and could be the worst team in the NFL.
You know, we've talked about this a few times on here, and I think Chris would share this sentiment as well. This quarterback class was not a bad or terrible quarterback class by any means. I mean, we can go really deep into the class. We were talking before the show about Skylar Thompson, 7th-round pick by the Dolphins, a guy that we all think is a pro-capable quarterback. I'll say E.J. Perry's a guy that I really like. He didn't play perfect in that Jaguars game, but yes, right. You know what I mean? There's quarterbacks out there. So when you look at guys like Desmond Ritter and people are asking how he fell, you're right, Jovan. There was a lot of overhype this year about how this was a terrible class. Yep. Desmond Ritter, you know, you mentioned it pre-show, one of the more pro-ready quarterbacks in this class, and it's showing in the preseason. But, you know, one of the things that really catches my eye just about the Falcons in general is a lot of the similarities between Mariota and Ritter. A lot of people were talking about that even before Ritter and Mariota wound up on the same team, that they had similarities, similar height, similar 40-time vertical. Now they get to work together. Mariota has said, you know, he's very open to helping Desmond Ritter in his development. I think that's going to help his game a lot. I think Mariota is going to make some plays this year. I think, you know, we saw 2 real big chunk plays in that game against the Jets the other day on Monday. I think Kyle Pitts is going to elevate this year. Chris was mentioning, you know, maybe Isiah Likely isn't Kyle Pitts. Well, Kyle Pitts is definitely going to have a big year. He's somebody I'm looking at in fantasy. So I'm intrigued by the Falcons quarterback room. I think Mariota is actually going to have a good year. I think he definitely has that upper hand, having worked with Arthur Smith before. I think that he'll be their week 1 guy, you know, to start the season. But yeah, I'll be watching the Falcons games this year. I'll be interested to see what their offense looks like.
What about you, Chris? Desmond Ritter, like Harrison said, you know, the ESPNs and the world, you know, made it seem over, you know, or try to make it seem like this draft class was garbage. And, you know, it was more so, hey, this year's draft class is not that good. But next year's draft class with C.J. Stroud and Bryce Young and Will Levis and Anthony Richardson and Tyler Van Dyke. This is the draft class. And it's like, hold on now. Desmond Ritter is saying, pump the brakes here. Skylar Thompson saying, pump the brakes here. Like, we can play some ball too.
And, you know, the same thing could be said about Malik Willis, who I think all of us were just mind blown that he fell to the round 3 in the draft. I mean, after each pick, after maybe pick 38, I'm thinking, all right, he's got to go at 39. Oh, he doesn't go 39.
To the Seahawks.
Right. He's got to go 40. You know, yeah, exactly. So, I mean, it was just mind blowing how far these guys dropped. And now you're seeing the narrative kind of change already with guys like Desmond Ritter, Malik Willis, Skylar Thompson. So, I mean, not a huge surprise, but it does feel good. We could kind of pat ourselves on the back. I know it's only preseason, and I feel like I've said that quite a bit already. But, I mean, the narrative was, if I could say, just quite garbage when you know, it was all playing out. So, yeah, I'm really excited to see this how this all pans out. I'm going to be honest with you. Really like Marcus Mariota. Unfortunate things have kind of panned out the way that they have the last few years. The only reason why I think there's a chance that we might see Desmond Ritter this season is because I do think Atlanta is probably the worst, or I think they're going to be the worst team this season. I do. Between them or Houston, but I think I give Atlanta that edge in being the worst team this season. But so I think that'll be a reason why we see Ritter eventually this season. Then we've seen Mariota in a Arthur Smith offense before, and it didn't necessarily look too great. And then obviously that's when Ryan Tannehill was put in Tennessee, and he just absolutely flourished and is not the most impressive quarterback in the NFL, but certainly one of the most efficient quarterbacks in the NFL. There could be some struggles there. We'll see. He's certainly familiar with the system, which obviously helps. And then, you know, as you said, when you have a weapon like Kyle Pitts, and hopefully the wide receiver London is back sooner rather than later, who they drafted in the first round. You got Cordell Patterson in the backfield. So, I mean, there are some pieces. The team isn't absolute trash. But I do think eventually they're going to pull the plug on Mariota, and they're going to want to get their young guy in there. As you said, probably the most pro-ready quarterback in this year's draft class, Desmond Ritter. So it's going to be, again, I think as of now, I think Atlanta probably, if I had to guess, will be the worst team in the league. But they're going to have a lot of intriguing and fun pieces to keep an eye on and to keep tabs on, such as Desmond Ritter.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely going to be exciting to see how his career pans out. Like you said, Atlanta's probably one of the worst teams. Probably won't see Ritter early, but when we get to that.
And when we do see Ritter, who's to say this isn't like I'm not trying to disrespect you like this, Marcus Mariota. I'm not calling you, I can't think. Who's to say this isn't the Seattle situation from years ago when Russell Wilson just completely outperformed the veteran that they had signed from Green Bay? Can't think of Matt Flynn. Again, Mariota, no disrespect, not saying you're Matt Flynn 2.0, but who's to say Desmond Ritter doesn't come in, not saying week 1 or week 2. It certainly looks like Marcus Mariota is going to start the season as the starting quarterback for the Falcons, but maybe week 6 or 7, they throw in Ritter. Maybe they need a change of pace at quarterback. They need something different there, and it gives the team that little bit of hype, gives that team a little bit of hope that they can actually maybe be a little bit better, be a little different in certain places, and maybe turn the season around at some point. But again, just a little bit of an observation. I think Ritter is going to be awesome, and hopefully he's the answer there in Atlanta long term.
Definitely, you hope, if you're a Falcons fan, you hope he's the answer, especially having Matt Ryan for X amount of years. You hope that bridge continues and you're not going Mariota for 2 years, another quarterback here for 2 years, another quarterback here for 2 years, Band-Aid, and not having a franchise guy. So hopefully Ritter, becomes that franchise guy. Last 2 topics here in our going around the NFL world here. Got to talk about this guy here, USFL MVP, Kevontae Turpin turned heads in the Cowboys' last preseason game. Not only had a punt return for a touchdown, but he also had a kick return for the touchdown. A lot of people were excited about him getting signed to Dallas just because knowing his playmaking ability. But again, we know guys from the USFL, they're going to have just a tough time sticking on the roster just because you kind of already know who's going to be settling a 53-man roster. So you got to come in and set the world on fire. And Kevontae Turpin, from the start of camp to in that last preseason game, has definitely made his mark and pretty much solidified that he's probably going to make that roster and be a weapon on special teams, which the Cowboys needed because they can't have CeeDee Lamb or Tony Pollard back there on punt returns. You can't do that with the lack of talent that you have at wide receiver right now. So it looks like Kevontae Turpin is likely going to be, and I don't want to be ignorant when I say this, he's likely going to be the USFL's PJ Walker, in that he's going to be that guy that everybody points to, like how we did with PJ Walker in the XFL. Like, this is the guy, and I think it's going to be this one for the USFL. It's like, this is the guy in Kevontae Turpin, who's been around the block. He played in USFL. Before that, he played, in the EFL, in the ELF, in the European League of Football. He played there too, apparently. I didn't know until Emery told me about that. I said, wow, that's crazy. So he's turning heads, fellas. USFL guy. A lot of them got signed. The Bears have one of them, and Marcus Gates. But Turpin's the one that's turning heads. And, hey, we saw what he did offensively for the Generals last year. I mean, this past season. Who said he can't make plays on offense for a Cowboys team that has CeeDee Lamb, that has Jalen Tolbert, who I really like, the kid out of South Alabama. But after that, Gallup's hurt. James Washington's hurt. I don't know how hyped we are on Noah Brown. I don't know how hyped we are for Semi Foco. So there's going to be opportunities for him to succeed and to make plays.
I'm surprised you can go that far down the Cowboys wide receiver depth chart.
I went off the top of my dome, and I just been writing a bunch of Cowboy stuff. So I've been writing Michael Gallup, Jalen Tolbert stuff. So I've been pretty enamored with their depth chart this season so far. It's weird. I know it's weird.
No, you gotta love seeing a guy like Turpin make the most of his opportunity, especially when you're playing in these other leagues, and then you're able to show that you can play at the next or at the highest level. And again, all these guys' dreams is to play in the NFL. So to see him, kind of do that and make a huge splash on the special teams unit with a kick return, with a punt return, and I'm sure we'll even see more of them in preseason game number 3 to kind of solidify that spot. But I mean, as you said, Jovan, you can't run CeeDee Lamb out there anymore on kick and punt return. You can't run Tony Pollard out there anymore. We know how important those two pieces are to this Cowboys offense now. So, Turpin, this is a great opportunity for him. He's made the most of it up to this point, and hopefully he sticks with the Dallas Cowboys, because he's not really giving them any reason for them not to stick with them. So really great to see, especially from a guy that's bounced around from these leagues to get an opportunity in the NFL and make the most of it. You mentioned Gates with the Chicago Bears. Roquon ending his hold in, man, may have just costed the man his dream.
Oh man, what about you, Harrison? Any thoughts on Turpin making plays and creating a roster spot for himself, which is not easy, especially because he was playing on one of the teams that season ended in late June, so there wasn't much rest time to go from. I was just playing from early spring to late June, and then I got to turn around and I got to jump and play in the NFL training camp. He's been able to carry that momentum over.
Yeah, that's the grind for all these guys. We saw in the XFL a few years ago, obviously in the arena leagues back in the day. And that's actually where Turpin got his start. He was signed to the Frisco Fighters back in 2020. That COVID season that wound up not happening. Shout out to Coach Dolezal, Coach Romaine, and all those guys. But yeah, it's really great to see all the USFL guys making some plays in camp. Like you said, this is kind of their PJ Walker right now, Quante Turpin, with the plays he's been making. So hope he goes out there, has a great third preseason game, and hopefully we see some more USFL guys get on those 53-man rosters, practice squads. That's what it's all about. That's what these spring leagues, developmental leagues are all about. So great to see.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens with Turpin. It'll be, if he can stick, obviously he'll stick on the 53-man roster. And if he can have a kick return or a punt return during the regular season, he might be the new weapon that everybody's going to, try to get. And we'll also see if Maurice Alexander Jr., who's with the Philadelphia Stars, see if he can stick. As he's, had a couple of nice returns for the Detroit Lions. So we'll see how that one goes. So we got to talk about one more thing here, fellas. We got to talk about the Philadelphia Eagles. They played the The Cleveland Browns. They played the Cleveland Browns last Sunday at 1:00 game. So it was a nice test to get people going to get them going for the regular season. They end up winning the game. They won 24-21 or something like that. I think that was the final score. 24-21. I was trying to pull up a video for this game, but I didn't set up the whole picture-in-picture share screen BS crap because I wanted to show the highlight of Harrison's boy, Reese Sinnett, throwing a bomb to Devin Allen, showing off his track speed for the 55-yard touchdown, who ended up being the game-winning touchdown in that game. But Harrison, to wrap us up for the podcast, just what was your thoughts from that game? Like I said, Reese Sinnett looked a little bit better out there than he did in the previous game against the Jets. Devin Allen scores his first touchdown after we, were clamoring for Devin Allen to get some playing time after the first game, and makes a play.
Yeah, another positive week for the Eagles in the preseason. You mentioned it, Jovan, Reed Sinnett with a nice day. I'm not the biggest Reed Sinnett fan. I wasn't overly impressed with his preseason debut, but I did think he looked better versus the Browns. I'll be intrigued to see how he does this week. It's going to be a big week for him and Carson Strong. They're really going to, feels like, go head to head and probably get both halves. Maybe Gardner Minshew sits, but I thought it was another positive game for the Eagles. A little bit sloppy on both sides with the weather. Defense didn't look great. Obviously, Josh Dobbs made some big plays against them. Want to clean that up, but just overall, I thought it was another positive week. We'll kind of see what the 53-man roster looks like heading into the season. We're really getting down to it. Had some cuts today. They've got a lot more cuts to go. I think they're at 80 right now, so a lot more guys to go before the season starts, but another positive week for the Eagles.
Definitely another positive week. Like I said, we'll see how everything plays down in against the Dolphins. I think they have joint practices again this week, so that AKA means we likely won't see the starters if things go well. If they have a nice, good couple of days of practice, like Nick Sirianni said during the game on Sunday, saying they kind of treated those joint practices as actual games. So he was like, you usually don't play two games in a row like that. So when our guys, basically played well, it gave us the the idea that they didn't need to, play them. So we'll see what happens with the Eagles. We'll see what happens with the rest of the NFL. As like I said, as we are wrapping up the preseason, and we will be getting closer and closer to week 1 of the regular season. Also, week 0 college football starts this weekend, so that's also something else to keep an eye on. Cannot wait for the great matchup of Idaho State and UNLV, and also the great Vanderbilt Commodores taking on Hawaii. Must watch TV there in week 0. No disrespect to Nebraska, but shout out to Illinois. They're open the season against Wyoming, so we'll see how that goes. So appreciate you fellas joining me on the pod.
You got Northwestern and Nebraska. Oh, you mentioned that. My bad.
Yeah. It's all good. Yes, Northwestern, Nebraska. They're playing over in Ireland.
In Ireland, that's right. Dublin.
And then their games at 12:30. Wow. So there's definitely going to be college football to watch if you're looking for some college football and don't want to watch baseball, like me and the rest of the generous sports betting people like I am. You can now watch college football. But appreciate both of you guys joining me on joining us for the pod. It was a great one going and talking about the Bears and also going around NFL landscape. Before we go, Harrison, what do you got? You can plug anything that you got going on, and then we'll do the same thing for Chris to wrap up.
Yeah, man. Total Sports Live, you mentioned it early in the show. Had an opportunity to sit on Ivy League Media Day the other day. That went well. Always got some stuff on the YouTube, but want to shout out the Limestone Livewire, man. We both really enjoyed that last night with Coach Furrey. Chris did a great job hosting the show.
Appreciate that.
People should definitely tune in all year, see what they got going on down at Limestone. We were both really impressed with the coaching staff that Coach Furrey's put together, the amount of pro guys that he has on that staff. So I know that roster is going to be right with them coaching it, the amount of pro experience they have. So everybody tune into that, the Chris and DJ show as well. Everything Chris has going on, we just really appreciate you coming on, giving us that Bears rundown today. So definitely just want to thank you for coming on the TSL pod today, man.
No, man, the pleasure was all mine. Appreciate the support from you two and from everybody out there always. So yeah, you guys could check me out. Easiest way probably is YouTube. Just search now 3 podcasts on air with Chris Shanafelt, Chris and DJ show, and then of course the newest one, Limestone Livewire. Still working to get that on iTunes and Spotify, but going to be working on that here tonight. So stay tuned, and shortly you'll be able to search on those platforms for those podcasts, or for the newest podcast, Limestone Livewire. You should be able to find on air and Chris and DJ show on both of those platforms. But again, easiest way, YouTube, and then on Twitter at Chris Shanafelt. It's spelled out right there, right underneath, right here, right there. Spelled out right there. Yeah, that'll be the easiest, YouTube, and then on Twitter at Chris Shanafelt. But no, really appreciate you guys. Always awesome talking football with you guys, and just getting your take on everything going around the league.
Most definitely. That's going to wrap up the podcast. Again, appreciate everybody for tuning in. Make sure you're following us on Twitter at Total Sports Live. Checking out TotalSportsLive.com as football season approaches. We'll be ramping up the stuff a little bit, doing a little bit of different things, here and there. Me and Harrison, we got some things in the works that we're talking through, mining through. Will there be a draft guide this season from us after years of talking about it? There just might be. You'll have to find out and see. So for like I said, you could do that. Follow us on just all the platforms, all the streaming platforms, Total Sports Live Podcast, TSL Podcast. Follow us all there. Follow these guys on Twitter at Chris Shanafelt, at Harry Brown-Russo, at Jovan 10. Follow all of us on Twitter. Again, appreciate everybody for tuning in, and we will talk to you guys next week. Have a good one. Enjoy the preseason action, and we'll see what happens, as final cut down day is going to be approaching right after the final preseason game. So everyone have a good one, and we'll talk to you soon.